Hey guys, Note Investor here. Want to bring an update on the Bitcoin trading account that I said I would keep you guys updated on. And spoiler alert, not a whole lot happening yet. It was a little bit of a slow start. Not making excuses here, but I was on the road over the last few days playing in the snow. I took some trades, but I was playing it pretty tight. I was keeping stops pretty tight and taking profits when I could get them. And so I'm going to use this episode to go over the documentation that I'm going to use to track a lot of this stuff and review some of the trades that I did make over the last couple of days. This is day number, what is this? Took the first trade on Wednesday, late Wednesday, so we're basically 6 days into this trading account. I'm going to the trade history. If you go to the order history, you can see here, I'm going to go back to the last, or the first day, the last sheet. You can see here, 1, 2 was the first one. So Icon, BCH, stopped out, then some Tron down here. A few orders that were never filled. These are those canceled. Some ETC, never got in on that one. EOS, never got in on that one. Some Tron was entered, Icon, Cardano, Neo, Litecoin. It looks like a lot, but it's just, there's a couple of multiple orders in there. So you're going to have, some double entries there where, I split the order, the buy into 2 buys and all of that stuff. So it'll make more sense when we go look at the charts, but wanted to share this with you guys. A lot of canceled. You can see I'll move stops. I'll move stops up. I'll put in some conditional buy orders, that sort of thing. They may never get filled. And so that's going to show up there. The ones that are there right now, for example, I've got a partial fill on an order that's being attempted there. Some fills here recently today. And so just to keep these videos somewhat short, I'm going to just do a review on this account, every so many trades. I'm thinking at this point, I'll just keep it to like every 10 trades or something. And then we'll go from there. Maybe even less than that if it becomes too much. So we'll just keep it there and see how it goes. So first off, the documentation, just to kind of review this so it'll make more sense as I go through some of these things. There's 3 primary sheets that I'm going to be maintaining as I document these trades. The first one is this trading sheet, as I labeled it, and it just keeps a couple of parameters in here. Let's go to the very first one here. For example, BCH and Icon were the first 2 trades here. And so a few things that are in this sheet to make note of. Obviously, first the symbol, the date, and then the key stats, strategy. This is important, right? Strategy. Whenever you're making a trade, you want to know, why are you in the trade? What's the setup that you're looking for? So I look for 4 things whenever I make a trade. One is the setup, right? What's the reason for it? You should be able to explain why you're buying a trade, not just because the price is going up or the momentum or we're pulling in, but why? Is it a pullback to a moving average? Is it a pattern such as an inverse head and shoulder? Is it a double bottom? Is it just a straight resistance break or buying at support? I mean, there really is thousands of trading setups that you can use. Everyone has different strategies you can divine, and it's up to you. I keep a handful that I like, and a handful, I mean more than 10 or so that I really trade. Specific patterns, pullback entries, MACD, signals, different types of setups. And so this first box here is important for me because it really forces me to define, why am I going to buy this? Or if I'm shorting it, why am I going to short it? It's a bear flag entry or break of trend line or something, right? So that's the idea there. And then some key stats here. The next thing I look for when I'm making a trade, other than the setup, what's my trigger? Okay, I like a specific setup. What's my trigger? When do I know I'm going to get in? And then once I get the trigger, what's my entry point? Sometimes they're one and the same, but not always. Sometimes the trigger may be an indicator or maybe a crossover of moving average or something, but then I may look for a more precise entry or something like that. And then, of course, very important, what's your stop loss? You got to have that. Before you make a trade, you always need to have a stop loss and then some targets, reasonable targets, specific targets, next to resistance or a Fibonacci extension or whatever it is that you're using, but you got to have some targets. And the reason for that is these 3 numbers, your entry point, your stop loss, and your target, will give you your R multiple. That's your risk reward ratio. So if I'm risking $1, am I making $2 or $3 for that potentially, right? And that's really the idea there. Now my minimum R multiple that I will take on any trade is 2. And so this is just kind of real time. So for example, let's say I had a really wide stop on this. You can see here it changes the R multiple to 1. and I just automatically say no go. That's too wide of a stop. So either one, look for a better entry, or just pass on the trade. Wait for a better setup. So R multiple is important for me. Now these here, BMI, that's my bull momentum index. Is a proprietary indicator that I use for the BTC and the ETH BMI. These are 4-hour BMIs at the time that I'm looking to make the trade. That's pretty easy. You can get that on the indicator, but if you don't, obviously, here on the alerts, we publish that. So I take the 4-hour BMI for BTC and for ETH. And why ETH? And that's important to me because I use it as a little bit of a barometer to how the alts are performing. And so if ETH is leading or the BMI on ETH is much stronger than that of BTC, it just gives me more confidence in the alt trades versus right now, for example, when ETH is pulling in, BTC is holding up better. And so I'll use that as my kind of quick barometer. So at the time of this trade, BTC BMI on the 4-hour was 95. On ETH, it was at 100 because it was just running so hard. And then on Icon, I pull up my indicator here on my charts, and it was at 100. So it just kind of gives me a quick check. And the next thing is the risk tier. I'll get to that here shortly because I have a separate sheet that I use for those position size calculations. Very important for me to maintain risk there. And then, of course, just some notes, right? What's my game plan? I'm liking this because of this. Here's the plan. I'm looking for a breakout. I'll move the stop up. Anything just to help me kind of, if I can go back later and say, what was I thinking? What was I looking at there? And then I'll update this profit loss later. Icon, this first trade was an 11% gain. Not too bad here. And then I'll keep a chart, right? So what was I looking at the time of the trade? I'll take a quick snapshot. I'll mark up my entry, my stop loss level, my potential targets, that sort of thing. And then I'll just kind of keep updating it along the way as it goes. And so these trade sheets, they are a lot of work and they do require a lot of documentation, but it forces me to move slower. It forces me to trade slower and to think through some of these positions, update some of this information before entering a trade so that I can go back later and say, why was I doing that? And if you're not trading or keeping a trading log, if you're an active trader, I would highly recommend it. Now, you don't need to do a whole trade sheet, a game plan thing. At minimum, you got to do something like this where you're at least just marking down what's my entry, what's my stop loss, what was my last update, because just doing this will force you to kind of start gauging, one, if you're over trading. Two, you can at least go back and look at the chart. Why did I get stopped out there? Maybe my stop was too tight, and that's the only way you're going to improve is if you're documenting and kind of keeping some sort of performance log. And then here, this is a little bit more in depth. You don't need to do anything this fancy, but I keep a few metrics here, that I auto calculate here. And so you can see here, it is a little bit of work to maintain this much documentation, but I'm using it especially for this account to really help document what's going on. So you can see 13 total trades, 8 wins, 5 losses, 62% loss. The most important factor for me is this profit factor, right? A lot of people focus on the winning percent. I'm not so concerned about that as much as I am the profit factor, because if I have 6 tiny losses, but 4 very big wins, that's going to help me much better than that. Or even if I have 2 really big wins, right? The profit factor is the most important thing. That's just the sum of total wins versus over the sum of total losses there. And so you can see here, this will just kind of give me a running total, my trade P&L, my running balance. And over the last trades, we'll go into the details, but you can see here the first trade, BCH, was stopped out fairly quickly. And then Icon was okay and just kind of ran. And at the high water mark of this account, it was about 5.2 BTC. I took a screenshot here. Let me zoom in on that for you guys. And I had a few trades open. It was just the high water mark, but I hadn't really booked a whole lot of these gains. Litecoin had already been booked. The first Icon trade had been booked. But you can see I had Cardano, Icon, EOS, NEO at the time. And then the market really turned over yesterday or 2 days ago and kind of gave up most of that gain. And so was kind of kicking myself for not booking some of those or tightening the stops. And then, of course, NEO, I just closed that one out early and then it took off today. So the joys. That's how it goes. And, some of this trading is, there's psychology, there's, specific market issues. Bitfinex was closing, maybe the market was going to crash, all that fun stuff. And so it's been a somewhat small week. I've been in BTC the whole time, obviously, so I've gained there from the big pop, but some of the alts just kind of taking it slower. Some of the stuff I'm talking about, the risk reward ratios, the position sizing, all that stuff is here on, for those of you that are subscribers to the alerts, you get access to this video course. You can also purchase this separately if you'd like, but you get free access to this as a subscriber to here. And so it'll make more sense if you kind of go through those, but just wanted to highlight that before we get into this next portion. So before I go into the specific trades, the most important thing I want to highlight in this video is position size, how I calculate that. In the next episodes, we will talk more about my chart scanning routine, how do I know which trades to select, and all that good stuff. So we're just going to keep building on it as it goes. But this position size calculator, it's pretty simple. You can build one your own if you really want to. I mean, it's just a straight calculation, but there's a couple of things that I want to highlight here that'll make sense as I kind of use the language here, if you're watching and following along. But here is just the account size, right? It could be 4 BTC, it could be 5 BTC. I also have a separate position size calculator for USD for my other accounts, or if I'm trading stocks or something like that, you can just convert this very easily to USD. But notice every time I change this, what it does is there's 5 risk tiers that I use here. And what this is the portfolio percent risk, meaning how much of the portfolio, the total account, is at risk on any one trade. And so I have 5 risk tiers that I have on this position size calculator, but for the most part, I operate out of these first 3. And so what that means is, for example, this column D here, 1% is the 1% risk tier. And what that means is on any given trade, I will risk a max of 1% of my trading account capital. And so the way you use that is you say, okay, on a specific trade, what's your stop loss? Let's say this specific trade had a stop loss of 5%. Then you just look for that column where the 2 meet up. That means you should risk no more than 0.2 BTC on a 1 BTC account if you're using a 1% risk. So that's how I use this. So going back to 5.0, I've been primarily operating out of the 0.5% risk tier, the smallest risk tier, just because over the last few days up until recently, BTC was just going sideways, choppy in a symmetrical pattern. And so I was not wanting to really up the risk appetite that much just yet. If we start to break out and the market really gets going, then I will bump it up a little bit and ride that momentum. And during strong bull markets, we're not in one right now because the weekly trend is still down, but during stronger markets, then I may operate out of the 1.5, even 2 BTC or 2% risk tiers. But right now, it's going to be primarily 1% or 0.5%, just so you guys know. So it's going to be pretty tight, smaller positions and tighter stops until we get a little bit more momentum going. So where does that show up on these sheets? Let's go look at the Neo trade, for example. Here on this row, risk tier, I fill this out whenever I enter a trade, either 0.5, 1, and then I put the position size that I'm going with. And this position size comes from here, and it will depend on my stop loss. So in this case, it was a 5% stop loss. So that was the position size on a 5.0 BTC account. The position size was 1.0, and that would, with the 5% stop loss, if I get stopped out, the most the account would take a hit for was 1%. So hope that makes sense. And that's how I use that. So I do my best to stay very disciplined to position size. I may be a little loose with maybe entries or something like that, but with position size, I try to keep a very strict discipline here and do my best to not like go too heavy on any one account. This is the max, of course. I can always go smaller if I wanted to, but I try not to go too heavy on any one trade. So let's get to the specific trades here. So I'm going to start at the beginning here and just kind of cover the first few very quickly. So the first one here was Icon. I believe it was Icon. Here we go. So this first EOS trade, I marked it in blue just because I never got filled. I was looking at this as a potential breakout, never did. And so we'll just skip over that. Tron, I had 2 Tron trades. I'll go over that next here. The first one worked, the second one got stopped out, but Icon. And so again, this was an inverse head and shoulder pattern. So my entry was at 660 with the stop loss at 620, first target at 760. And you can see here on the charts what I was looking at here. This was pre-breakout. So I was looking at this right shoulder forming. Let me zoom in here a little bit for you guys. There we go, that's better. And that's what I was watching. So I saw the volume coming in. This was pre-breakout, so I jumped in there, and my stop loss was really tight. You know, ideally I should have put my stop loss at the low of that right shoulder low, which was around 600, but I kept it tight because even entering here and putting a stop at the low of this part of the consolidation at 620, that was already a 6% stop loss. And with my first target here around 760, it was about 2.5 R multiple. So I wanted to jump in early, but I didn't want to give it too wide of a stop because that would have reduced the R multiple even more. And so I just kept my stop there, and luckily it worked out. But that's how I took that, because that was a pre-breakout trade. So I jumped in there. And you can see here on the follow-up, this was how it looked later. And again, this was right when I don't want to call it a vacation, it was only a few days, but I was heading up to the snow and I wasn't going to be able to watch it as much. So I started to close some of these out. I thought, hey, I'm going to take the quick gain on some of these. And, you know, I could have just moved my stop up, but I decided to book the gains here. And that's some of the notes that I made there on Icon. Let me go back to the notes here. So profits, loss 11%, added to position on the way up, bringing the total buy to 0.8 rather than tighten stops. I took the entire profit into strength at 73, but mostly due to me being offline. Chart is still worth looking at for a secondary entry, right? So just some quick notes that I make there as I go through some of those trades. The next one was BCH, and here's what I was looking at the time. Let me zoom in on the chart for you guys. There we go. And so at the time, BCH was breaking this downtrend. We had already seen a high volume candle pushing higher, and then prices just sat tight here for a little while, and then we started to see volume coming in, and that was my entry signal, right? I had my trigger. My trigger was the break of the downtrend, and then it sat tight, so I thought I'm going to wait for this little resistance to be cleared, and I will begin to enter at that point. Here's a different, closer view of the chart there. And so at the time of entry, I took a snapshot of the chart. It was looking pretty good. Volume was coming in here above average after sitting tight. And so that was my entry with a very tight stop. My entry was literally the low of this consolidation, just because this is more of a counter trend trade, and it was a long consolidation. So I wasn't sure if it was going to really get going or just kind of wick me in and then get me out. So that was my entry. I did get my stop hit shortly thereafter. We'll go look at the chart real time to see what it's looking like now, but you can see my numbers there, 43.75 with the stop loss at 42.20, and I was looking at a first target around 5,000, which would have been a 4.0 R multiple, and really had more upside than that. And then again, risk here 0.5%, so my position size on that was 0.7 BTC here. Let's go look at that chart. So here we go. This is BCH ABC on the BTC pair, and this is the follow-up, and you can see this was my entry right here. Basically, it was looking good for about 2 candles, and following candle, it actually followed through to the upside, went up a little bit, and then just totally reversed. When it stopped out here, I got stopped out there, and I thought, oh man, I just got wicked out on my stop, but it never really recovered. It tried to go again, pulled back, tried to go again, and so far has just been drifting lower. And so I'm not too mad about that. It was just a quick stop, a small trade, not that big of a deal. But that's the purpose of the stops, right? You always have a plan, you know, and follow the plan. It would have been very easy for me to say, oh, that's just the wick. I'm going to wait and, you know, wait till it closes below. And you could, but if that was part of your plan, then that's the way you do it. Otherwise, for me, the plan was moving below that, I'm out of the way. Just because I wasn't able to watch it closely and didn't want to wait to see if it was a close below or anything like that. But you can certainly adjust it, but you got to have a point in time or a point in price where you say, hey, if this happens, it invalidates the idea for my trade, then I'm out of the way. And in this case, the idea for my trade was we had a breakout, tight consolidation. I was looking for some follow through momentum to the upside, and then ultimately a break above this resistance. Never happened. It got wicked above and then pulled right back. So that was the end of that trade. What was some of the other ones here? So ETC, I was looking at this guy for a potential breakout. Never happened. So filled out my spreadsheet and all that stuff. Wasn't a really high R multiple anyway. Again, was operating under the small risk tier. Put a conditional order in, but then the market started to pull back, so I canceled that conditional buy order. The next one was Tron. Looking at Tron, break of this downtrend line. That was the setup. I had a conditional buy order on this guy here, and you can see where that was at around 523. And so that's where I filled this out. Momentum bull flag, looking for a breakout, 523 with a stop loss at 500, target 1, 620, target 2, 650. Would have given me about a 4.2R multiple. These were the parameters at the time. Not a real strong BMI, but that's because it was in pullback mode, but it was still above my minimum requirement. BTC and ETH, of course, were strong. And this one kind of chopped me up a little bit here. And it's unfortunate because Tron is continuing to move strongly here as I record this. But that was my entry right here on that 523. And so it broke out above that. Then it sat tight, put my stop in there at the level. What was that stop level here? 500 even. And so that was where I put the stop at 500. And it continued higher. And I believe I just booked the quick gain on this guy here into some of this. This was the same with Icon and Litecoin. As I was kind of hitting the road, decided to get out of the way. And then it looked like it was done for a bit, put a little bit of a double top, pulled back, and then here yesterday or this morning, breaking out of this nice little base here and going again. So Tron still looking pretty good there. That was the trade though. That was the setup that I was looking at here with a target at 620 and clearly has hit that. Now it's at 645. So that would have made for a nice trade if I would have just been patient and let it ride out, but I kind of didn't want to. I was on the road and I didn't want to think about it a whole lot. So again, it is what it is. Not making excuses, but that's the way I decided to play it. Looking at Litecoin, again, Litecoin gave me a kind of a quick 9%er. Here's the setups that I was watching. This was a breakout, and this one's interesting, right? So let's look at this one. So here was the chart as I made the entry, right? It was this nice ascending triangle base. Give me 1, 2, 3 hits to the line, and then volume started to come in. So I jumped in there, and I probably bought near the very top of that move, right at resistance, which is always dangerous to do when you're buying right at resistance pre-breakouts. But the volume looked like it was coming in, and then it pulled right back in. And so here's the way it looked, about a day later. That's where I bought, went higher, and then pulled back. But it never hit my stop. I let it ride. I thought twice about just getting out of the way, especially with me being on the road. I thought, oh, this is pulling back. But then I was looking at the trend lines thinking, the reason for me entering the trade is still valid. It hasn't violated the low there, so I'm going to let it ride. And luckily this one came back, and then some good volume came in, and then that one finally broke out. And this is the way it looked here. Got that quick 9%, decided I'm just going to get out of the way and hit the road. So I took profits there, and then it paused for a little bit before going higher again. So that was the trade on Litecoin. And that's where most of these here are documented, right? So you can see, that was Icon there, BCH there, Tron 1, Tron 2, added on a pullback, got wicked out, Icon, Litecoin, Cardano. And so, not real big wins, nothing too drastic, nothing to write home about, but not a bad start, still in the green. Jumped on a few more trades here today. We'll go over those in more detail in the next episode, but currently looking at, let me go back to the screen here, Cardano, Lumens, ARC, and Icon. Looks like Icon's still trying to be filled on partial position there. So those are the ones I'm looking at for now. A lot of these USD pairs, I'm liking the setup still. They are trying to break out of resistance, trying to break out of inverse head and shoulder patterns, those type of things. And so if they can get going on the USD pair, I'd like to see them keep up at least with BTC. It's going to be interesting to see how the active Bitcoin breaks out. When we saw this quick 6% spike here over the weekend, most of the alts didn't keep up with that quick move, as is often the case when Bitcoin moves that sharply. And you saw during this big spike, a lot of the alts had a sharp pullback reaction relative to BTC, since they weren't keeping up as much as the move. USD pair-wise, a lot of them did move upward, just not as strongly. So if we do see a breakout over 4,100, it'll be interesting to see if some of those alts follow suit, or if they also get a little shakeout again. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. We'll go over the trades next episode on terms of the ones I'm currently in, but just very quickly, ARC looking like it may be finding a little bit of a low. Saw this bullish engulfing candle, so jumping in there. That's a very tight stop, small position. What's that stop here? It's about not even 2% stop, so keeping that one tight. Icon is a re-entry. on the pullback here, looking like it may want to get going again. So that's the reason for that. Some other indicators that I use on that entry there. Same with Cardano, and what was the other one? Lumens, Stellar Lumens, and that's mostly using the daily chart on that guy there. Let me find Stellar on Binance, and so I'm looking at the daily chart, liking this buy here right at support, long time support. And so again, another relatively tight position, not going to give it much room to the downside. If it doesn't hold that low, then I'll just get out of the way and wait for a better setup. But what I'm looking for is a little bit of a double bottom pattern completion, and so a break above this neckline around that 3300 would be good confirmation, and then I'd be looking for another move to this next upside target. So those are the ones I'm watching right now. We'll see how they play out over the next few days. But that's going to be it for today, guys. And I'll try to post an update every few trades, maybe 5 trades, maybe 10 trades. I'll see how long each video goes, and we'll kind of adjust accordingly. But we'll cover scanning routine and chart setup and alerts and all that stuff in the next one. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys then. Take care.